This game takes place in Tokyo, where everyone suddenly vanishes. Like they're trapped as lost souls for a bad guy's ritual thing, and you are Akito. He's a young man who seemingly died but managed to awaken with the soul of another within him, this badass dude named KK. Now, with KK, Akito gets cool magic abilities, and they set out together to solve the mystery of what's going on in the city, hopefully save all the citizens, and also find Akito's sister. And presentation-wise, there's some thrilling cutscenes, some somewhat interesting characters, good music, good visuals, and really good voice acting. You have the option to play in English or Japanese. I chose Japanese, and the voice actors are very good. But gameplay-wise, you venture through Tokyo streets on foot in what I think is the best aspect of the game. The recreation of Tokyo here is staggering, dude. It manages to feel really vast, like a real city, and extremely detailed. Like every block is different. Every district has a different vibe, and all of it looks pretty creepy and unsettling as everything is abandoned, and all that's really left over here are like abandoned cars and people's clothing and personal items on the floor. It does a good job of walking this weird line of it being like, ooh, what if everybody disappeared? With it also actually feeling like an attack, and that's essentially what it was. It's cool. It's very different. Now, it won't be long before you come across some enemies and engage in the combat. The enemies are everywhere, roaming the streets and on rooftops, and the battles can get pretty intense because you can only take a few hits, but the main flow is this. You can crouch and use a little bit of stealth if you come up on some enemies and do some stealth kills. You also have a magical bow and arrow to take some dudes out, and you can throw down talismans to temporarily disrupt enemies in certain ways. Now, that's your basic tool set without spoiling too much. Once all-out combat begins, the rest is all magic. And it kind of operates like a simple first-person shooter, if you want me to keep it kind of basic. You know, you have a shield kind of block ability for defense, and offense-wise, you need to blast enemies enough for them to reveal their core, and then you rip it out for XP, or just finish them off. Now, you swap between different elemental attacks on the fly. You shoot rapid-fire wind gusts at dudes. Water blasts kind of serve up as like kind of up-close and personal attacks. Fire attacks is kind of like bombs, and more spins on them the further you go without spoiling things. But each attack can also be charged up and released for a special variation, and generally become more useful the more capacity you unlock and the more you level up and spend skill tree points to just be able to do more stuff. And that skill tree is pretty great. I like it a lot. It's paced fairly well, and getting into it after a few hours genuinely makes the game's combat feel much better. Now, it can be pretty satisfying to get a few enemies stunned at the same time and then like weave a big massive thread with your magical hands and then do a boom thing and rip their cores out. The hand animations and like the visual effects for your hands on screen and blasting and finishing off enemies either up close or from afar are just absolutely freaking stunning, and one of the best parts of the game, especially with how it all works with the DualSense controller vibration and the trigger resistance. The thing absolutely like abuses your controller battery. It does not give a shit, but it's cool, and it really helps sell it all. Enemy types are various different forms of ghosts, a few different types of headless kids, bigger, grosser killer ladies, and a bunch of Slendermans. I mean, like really slender men and women here. There's all varying sizes and difficulties, and there are a few cool bosses too. Unfortunately, it all gets stale after a while. Now, even though they pace out the new enemies fairly well, they all kind of boil down to just blast the hell out of them. That's really it. Not too much to it, except for a few special occasions. And it just kind of gets old, you know, mindlessly blasting away enemies, just hammering on the trigger, especially on the tank characters and some of the bosses. The bosses shake things up a bit, but the mileage might vary depending on your personal taste. I found myself a bit bored at times with the combat encounters, but the combat itself, the actual raw feel of it, might be thrilling enough to you. The other place it might get stale for some people is the overall activities. Now, there are main missions, side quests, and things to collect. Fun collectibles, cosmetic items, beads that give you certain stat boosts, and just generally lots of opportunities to grind out and get your character stronger. Fighting, capturing ghosts, capturing unique yokai creatures, all stuff that does a good job of feeling connected to this whole Japanese ghost fantasy lore. But there's a lot of it and it's pretty endless, and it's either there just to keep you busy and kind of, you know, stretch things out, or level up and get your character stronger. There's not too much other stuff. Like the cosmetic stuff is cool, but it doesn't necessarily grant you many abilities. Although, side note, I will say the cosmetics are pretty cool. I went from having kind of like a quick stop 7-Eleven jersey to a cool hoodie looking like a hype beast to just kind of making my character look like John Constantine with a trench coat. There is some good stuff there at least, but the main missions are obviously the highlight. You know, you typically go into interiors and get to experience unique and wild moments like morphing hallways, trippy visuals, unique encounters with the bosses, and even the occasional little spooky scare. You know, just some good old-fashioned good video game stuff where Tango is doing their thing, and I think doing it pretty damn well. Now, that does bleed into the open world too. You know, there are a few cool details and secrets to find, and really cool art direction and sound design, down to little details like how the streetlights change colors during a fight, to the way the weather comes and goes, and just atmospheric effects. I like it. Now, the side quests are a bit more 50-50. You find ghost NPCs, you talk to them, and get a task to help them pass on, and for